How did a California donut shop help save thousands of refugees? Find out on Seemingly Unrelated. It's time once again for your favorite show on the internet radio. This is Seemingly Unrelated, the podcast where we connect seemingly unrelated elements of history, politics, society, and culture that you never knew turned into something so much more. I should say you don't know, and I don't know, because I come into every episode completely blind. But this man, Mr. Sir Professor Andrew Johnstone, he is the one with all the knowledge that he unspools for all of us every other week. We're so thankful to have you here as we combat misinformation and inspire intellectual curiosity in the way that only the good Dr. Professor Sir Lord can. I am 1/3 of the triumvirate that makes up the Seemingly Unrelated universe. I am Jason Heat, and I am a podcaster. I am a producer, a writer, director, and a professional wrestling color commentator and creative. But I cannot do it alone because literally I have no idea what we're about to talk about. That all comes from this man's mind. Say hello, Doctor.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to more of our Seemingly Unrelated.
And of course, you can't have a triumvirate without three. That's basic math. So we've got our producer, editor, and Gen Z ambassador, Naomi.
Hello. Don't know if anyone else doesn't know what a triumvirate is, or is that just me?
Just a group of three.
Okay. So we're starting off the episode immediately making me feel stupid again, so that's great.
No. You're not stupid, Naomi.
Don't invite me to do a pub quiz. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair.
I promise you I never will. Andrew, share with me from your deep reservoir of arcane knowledge.
Great. Jason, this is our food month. All the episodes this month have to do with food as we bring season 2 of Seemingly Unrelated to the world. And I want you to close your eyes for me, please. Just let it loose, shake it out, baby. We're here. We're safe. We're in a safe zone for now. We're safe.
For now is a really important part of that sentence.
Very important.
The history of this show.
I want you to imagine a world where your X gene mutation is activated, and it allows you to eat any food that you want in the world, any quantity, any amounts, any types, any ingredients, with no negative health impacts. You become some sort of I don't know what your superhero name would be, but you're like the unstoppable delicious. I don't know. You're the gourmand supreme.
Okay.
How much are donuts factoring into your new diet?
I think they are a once in a while treat, to be honest. It's not that I would not have them, and I would have them more often than I have them now, but it is not the first thing I thought of. I'll be honest. When you were first like, you could eat anything with no negative consequences, this is a true story. Before you said ingredients, I was like, oh, I'd love to try rocks.
Like actual rocks?
Well, salt is a rock, and I'm wondering if I could eat any others. I was like, if it was more like Matter Eater Lad, and I had the power to eat anything
that is
safely.
The actual craziest thing you've ever said. that is where your brain went. I'm baffled.
I was like, I wonder what rocks would taste good.
To be fair, I don't think it's the craziest thing Jason said. I would say that's on brand because Jason is an explorer.
Yes.
He's a man.
I know.
He's a man.
I think that was like an ink blot test, but in like food related things. And like, if I was a therapist, I would be learning something about Jason from that comment, if you know what I mean.
I just think it's incredible that you were like, how do donuts fit in? And I was like, I don't fucking know, but I did think about stones.
I wanted to eat some rocks.
Oh my gosh. He's coming for me.
Oh, maybe. Wow. All right. Now there is some therapy to unpack.
Yeah,
here.
now the Freud has entered the equation. Well, name you so judgmental on Jason's answer. What are you eating?
Loads of mac and cheese. I just want to eat buckets of cheese.
That's fair.
Buckets of cheese sounds a lot, to be honest. All right, so why are we talking about donuts?
Why are we talking about donuts? I think of, like last episode, we talked about national dishes. And one of the things that shook loose this whole thread was an interview I saw with Tom Holland. That is the young gentleman currently playing Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So he was asked, what's better, British food or food from the United States? And his response, Jason, was, there's no food from the United States, so you can't make a comparison. There's no such thing as, quote, American food. And like the
that is
interview,
not true.
Yeah,
that
the
is not
interviewer
true.
was like, what are you talking about? And Tom Holland goes, it comes from other places. Like, what's in American food? The interviewer, not prepared for this, says like hamburgers, which to be fair, the hamburger sandwich definitely started in the United States.
100%.
Now, whether or not there were like Mongolians grinding meat and slapping it between bread 500 years ago, I don't know. Anyway, the next thing the guy said was French fries. Then I was like, all right, this interviewer is stupid. Because
there's absolutely American food.
There's totally American food. First of all, to say there's no American food is to be racist. Sorry, but loads of American food comes from black people. Yes. Barbecue. Everything that would be considered Cajun or Creole
100%.
cuisine. That's 100% from black people and using ingredients from the French Empire and these things all mixed together. Tons of things that are American food. Like there's so many crazy inventions that are very American. And I thought, to me, in my heart, when I think of the quintessential food that is in the United States that you can't quite get identically elsewhere.
Cornbread.
That's not a bad shout, but I was going to go with the donut. You can get good donuts in the rest of the world. Do not get me wrong. Beignets, for example, delicious. You can get them.
Mochi donuts have become very popular.
Donuts, delicious. The Krispy Kreme Corporation is here in Britain in goddamn force. There's so many Krispy Kremes, but Jason, they don't turn on the sign. You can't get them hot and fresh. You get them at the grocery store, which is a sin. I would say, this is my opinion, but the donut of the United States, a donut which is held in the claws of an eagle that is firing an automatic weapon with its beak, is the superior donut in the world, and it is not quite accurately replicated outside of that sphere, which is crazy to think about, right, Jason? Because what is a donut?
Well, generally it is a round piece of fried dough that is often either glazed or drizzled with toppings, and
Yeah. And it tends to come in two major forms, right? Cake donut, which is obviously is a unleavened donut, usually made with a less glutinous flour. And then the yeast donuts, as the name implies, they have yeast in them, and they tend to be risen before they are fried.
I thought you were going to say donut or hole as the two major ways in which they come.
And truly one of the great examples of food in the United States is the donut hole, right? Because donuts come in a circle and the center is missing. We'll explain why very shortly. Some genius out there figured out that people in the United States must think that it's punched out, that there is a piece of donut missing, and these bastards, probably at the Dunkin' Donuts Corporation, are stealing some of your sweet, sweet donutty goodness from you. But that's not true, right, Jason? It's just balls of donut dough that are flash fried and then deliciously covered in things.
You have thought more about this than 99.9% of people who go, I would like a donut, but I'd like it in a smaller size, please.
But it's not. Oh, but going back to what you were saying before, it's not in a smaller size, sir. You do not order munchkins or donut holes 2 or 3, right? You eat like a dozen of them.
No, well, you could, theoretically.
Please do not lie to me and say that you were eating only 1 donut's worth of donut holes in a sitting. So, where did the modern donut come from, though, Jason? It seems to have a fairly clear connection. Unlike a lot of the other foods that we've discussed, there's a pretty straightforward origin point for donuts as we understand them, which is the Dutch oiliekoeken, which is really annoying to say.
The oiliekoeken?
Oiliekoeken, oily cakes.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a donut.
Which is just like, associated with Lent. So, right, we're using up the last of the oil. It's like a pancake, basically, but with the Dutch, it's just like bigger and fluffier. It's not flat. You would fry it in a vat of oil rather than put it on a hot griddle. Just something the Dutch came up with. And usually for the Dutch, it would be cooked in either beef fat or something like a rapeseed oil, which grows quite commonly in that region. So that comes over with the Dutch to New Amsterdam, which, of course, we now call New York City. And oiliekoeken, you take your dough, you stuff it with fruit and nuts, and then the reason they really wanted to fry it on the trips to New Amsterdam is because a sufficiently fried donut, is extremely shelf stable. Like, you kill everything.
Well, you get rid of a lot of the moisture.
Right. And if you pack fruits and nut in the middle, then what you have is an entire meal in a little pocket ball kind of a situation that you can just stack up, just put it in a sack, put it on the cargo hold, and then you can ship yourself to New Amsterdam over 6 weeks or however long it takes for the journey in your particular time. So this stuffing of the donut with fruits and nuts is maybe where the term donut comes from, because it's a dough with nuts. The term first appears in the 19th century in English language sources as a part of like mercantile shipping lanes. Like, there are all these trade companies. This isn't the East India, West India trade stuff from the 18th century. This is the new, more, industrialized trade routes of the 19th century. And the big thing with those trade routes was systematizing food. So this is where, like,
where everything starts that is being dismantled now.
Well, you could just do what the British did, and you can go around the world conquering places, because the donut became associated with its more common flavor friends as a result of its stability in being carried on long sea voyages. So cinnamon, for example.
So basically, donuts is the evolution of hardtack.
Yes. So yeah, donut is the original donuts were a kind of hardtack vibe.
Donuts are better, I'll tell you that.
Donuts are definitely better.
What's hardtack?
Oh, hardtack is you basically make bread or like a cracker, and you just bake the fuck out of it. You remove all of the moisture. You make it as dry as the Sahara, and then it becomes
a biscuit, basically.
A biscuit. And a cracker. Yeah. It's not a biscuit.
Like a crouton.
Yes, like a really dense, heavy crouton. That's so hard you cannot bite into it.
And the point is?
Because it's completely shelf stable. Like, there is hardtack from the American War for Independence that has been eaten in the last decade.
But you have to crumble it and remoisten it.
You gotta remoisten it.
And usually you find that it's deliciously flavored with maggots.
And now for something completely unrelated. Well, do you know, it's like once my mum accidentally baked a bread for 3 days because we had an Aga and we just couldn't smell that it was burning. And then one day, like, she was like, the bread! And then pulled it out. And it was actually charcoal. Like, it was all black charcoal. And we had it on the side for 3 years.
How the fuck are you all alive if that is a thing that could have happened in your house? I'm sorry.
She was tired. She was a mum of 3. I was really chatty.
Wait, you had a what? So a naga?
An
What is
auger?
that?
An auger.
Do you not know an auger? Do you not have augers?
It's not a thing in the United States.
No.
Whoa. It's like a coal fire oven that you that runs in your home.
You were burning coal indoors for 3 weeks nonstop? And you guys... I'm sorry.
We had a coal fire oven in our house.
So hold on, Jason.
Referee
Not
this.
only were they burning a coal fire oven for 3 days, you never turn it off. That's how you heat your home. Behind an auger oven will be a stone wall, which runs the entire height of the house and some substantial length. And the heat from the oven heats that wall up, and then that dissipates. That heat goes from the stone into the rest of the house.
It's really expensive, but it cooks really good food. And you have like 6 different stoves inside that you can bake stuff in. And then the tops are like always like hobs that are always hot. And you just have to run your auger.
Haven't died from some combination of a house fire or carbon monoxide. Like the fact that you guys would have no idea that this is still running and that you're burning it,
That's
and
so
no
funny
one could
you don't have
smell
that in
it.
America.
Yeah.
Do you know what? That's actually so archaic now I think of it. But later, any American listeners look up an auger and you'll want one. They're actually lit.
Naomi. So yes, its journey around the British Empire is how the donut became associated with things like cinnamon and cardamom and sugar. Honestly, they didn't really put sugar into donuts, into oilekuchen. It was a thing that the British brought to the table.
Well, it's also a preservative.
Yeah, that is also, thank you, a preservative. Excellent.
Yes.
Desiccates everything. So it exists then for a few hundred years, but it exists as one, a sphere, roughly the size of like a baseball, like a fist-sized sphere, packed with nuts and fruit.
Question for you, though.
Yes.
Sorry to... You say it comes to the Dutch, but like the Jewish people have been doing sufganiyot, jelly-filled donuts for ever. That's an overstatement, but a long time.
Wow. Since, in my research, since about the mid-18th century, which is part of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment. So, but the Jews were frying all sorts of things for who knows how long, and question mark, thousands of years. But then again, Jason, it's the 19th century. How influential are Jewish people going to be on U.S. culture? After World War II, different story. Jews, hugely influential.
I'm just saying, you're talking about the origins of the donut, and the sufganiyot been around for a long time. We got to celebrate the Maccabees and the oil and stuff.
Maccabees and the oil. Oh, so good. So, the donut is, unfortunately, not easy to make, right? Have you ever made donuts from scratch?
I think once, but
deep frying
is not nearly as fucking complicated as people think. I will say that when I got
thermometers, before electric thermometers and all that, if you're just got a Dutch oven and a fire, like remember this is before electric or gas stoves. So think about that.
Sure.
So it's not something that is necessarily accessible to everyone, especially again in a time before we had stoves, tops like we have now, where you're cooking things in
it's
embers.
not like an aga.
It's not like an auger, which has been around for a while. And then we got to pack it with the nuts and the fruit. It becomes expensive. And honestly, most people don't like donuts it's nice. Again, the people who are eating it the most through the 19th century are sailors who aren't known for their palate, right? These are the guys who are let me have some salt pork slapped onto some hardtack and I'll be fine until Tuesday.
Well, to be fair, I doubt that they were enthusiastic about it. I think that is simply a reality of the situation. Correct. That's like saying astronauts love dehydrated food. No, they love that they can have sustenance.
They don't die.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not known as a treat for a long time. It is thought of, like you said, a sustenance food.
Yes.
Until the First World War. During the First World War, actually it's kind of still known as sustenance food, but it's making that transition. During the First World War, the Red Cross brings loads of donuts to the U.S. soldiers who are serving in the trenches. Behind the trenches, obviously they don't go into the trenches with donuts. But they get all these ladies together and dress them up, and they become the donut dollies, and they serve donuts to the troops when they're on their rotations out from the trenches as just a cheap and effective way to say, here's something warm for you to eat and a nice lady to look at.
What is the uniform of the donut dollies?
It just, if you can think in your mind of the ladies' military uniform, it's just that. It's the brown blazer and a pencil skirt. That's, I guess, a maxi technically. So there's a marketing campaign about it. People are like, hey, the donut dollies. This is a thing you too can support the troops by being like a donut dolly and sending, I don't know, stockings or war bonds or something to
As someone who does this for a living, I guarantee you this came about purely because someone had the idea for the alliteration.
Donut dollies?
Yeah.
So I think it is just because shipping over milk and flour and oil to fry it all in and sugar is cheap. It's just super cheap. And it's not that. Yeah, it's just inexpensive, because that was a big thing with the Salvation Army and the Red Cross, that they were trying to do charitable work to support the soldiers on a budget, for sure.
Yeah.
So once it's established as being part of this war effort, we start to see the donut make a little bit of headway, but the big problem is making the dough, right? You can fry a donut relatively quickly if you've got a nice big vat of hot oil. But you got to mix the dough, and then you've got to form it into a shape and put it in, and that becomes very limiting.
You just described the process of baking. You're oh.
Correct. But with baking...
People have been doing that for quite a while.
You're much less limited in space, right? So if you've got a vat of oil, let's say you've got a Dutch oven going, right? You can only be cooking 4 donuts at a clip?
Sure.
Right? So with the baking, you can kind of do all the work, slide everything into a big old oven.
So basically what you're just saying is that it wasn't scaled for industrial use until this point.
Correct. 1920, the year 1920, a Russian refugee, someone escaping the Bolsheviks, came to New York City, a man named Adolf Levitt, and he tried to sell donuts on Broadway as a pre-dinner snack.
We call him the good Adolf.
Yeah, the good Adolf. Adolf Levitt. His last name is Levitt, which means that probably this is a guy that Hitler would want to murder.
Yeah, it's a very good example of how sometimes one person really ruins a name for the rest of time.
Yeah. Yes, he really does. No one can, although I'm sure some people have. So he wants to speed up the process, and he comes up with, if you could make the donuts, if you can make the dough fast enough, then a long, shallow, pool of oil would definitely be a good fit, because you can start adding in donuts more quickly. And he invents a donut dispensing machine that uses a funnel design, and there's a little clipper, there's like a little stopper at the bottom, so that you basically pull the trigger, you squeeze the little mechanism, and it lets out just a little bit of dough, and then it cuts it off. Little bit of dough and cuts it off, so that he can evenly portion out these dough balls into a shallow, long vat of oil. But by his design, it naturally cut that hole in the donut, making them into a ring shape, which was super convenient because at that same time,
You could play ring toss.
There was another little snack, another little meal that was making its way onto the streets of New York City that had a hole in the middle specifically so that you could line them up on a stick.
I bet that I know what this is.
What is it, Jason?
It's a bagel.
It's a bagel, right? So that happens literally serendipitously. Like they sort of come about around the same time, and it is for two totally different reasons. One, because it's much more convenient to slide them on the stick so you can hand them out and sell them. And the other one, it's just the guy's machine punched holes into dough.
And much like Wawa versus Sheetz, the breakfast wars were born.
Oh man, what a fascinating breakfast war that is, because a bagel and a donut are, the only similarity is the design. They're shaped.
They're both breakfast carbs with a ring shape, but otherwise they're very different, and yet I still do feel like they are often not something you have both of in the morning. If I have a bagel, I probably don't want a donut. And if I have a donut, I probably don't want a bagel. So you're making the choice. So you're going savory or sweet with your breakfast carb.
Yes. So, Adolf Levitt starts selling these donuts, and because he can turn them out at a lightning speed, the volume increases, and he begins to sell them 2 donuts for a nickel, Jason. And that is the moment the donut begins to skyrocket into the
Public
American breakfast icon, because 2 donuts for a nickel is huge, right? It's a lot of food. And it is can you think of a more American story? A Russian immigrant comes to the States, through his ingenuity, invents a machine that allows him to produce this donut, this delicious treat that everyone can now get 2 for a nickel. And by the end of the decade, apparently he was making $25 million a year in sales, not of the donuts, but of the machines.
Yes.
Because everybody else wanted to do it. This coincides then, Jason, with another major moment in U.S. history, the Great Depression. So the donut ascends just as the economy crashes.
From what I've heard, there was nothing much great about it.
So this is when there's a lot of like joblessness centers and bread lines and soup kitchens and things all across the United States. And the donut became closely associated with those joblessness centers because it was a way for them to cheaply get something inside of these unemployed men in terms of food before they went off and had an interview. Like, you have a bunch of guys come to your office, you need to place them into jobs because you as a basically a headhunter get paid when they get a job, right? You get paid by the people looking for workers. So you give them a cup of coffee and a donut, and then that's just, spruce them up a little.
Absolutely. That's the energy.
Yeah.
That's fuel. That's power.
Yeah.
Caffeine and carbs. That is why a lot of us start our day with exactly that combination.
Yep. And that is when those two things became joined at the hip. The coffee and the donut is because a bunch of unemployed guys wouldn't have eaten anything probably for a day or more. And this was just like, my God, you look like shit. Here's a donut and a cup of coffee. Go wash your face. Your job interview is at 10, Probably even more iconic story of the United States than the immigrant who
I think literally that is the ultimate American story. You look like shit. Here's coffee and a donut. Wash your face. The job interviews. I just repeat what you said because I thought it was perfect. That was a perfect bit.
So once it gets cemented as that most American thing, obviously the next step is, what do we do in the United States? We got to brand that shit. We got to start a franchise.
Mass produce it.
Winston-Salem, North Carolina, in the year of our Lord, 1937, two brothers who borrowed all of the ingredients, which is insane, formed the Krispy Kreme donut shop. And that became the first franchise donut shop in the United States.
Really? More than Dunkin'? Before Dunkin',
Dunkin' Donuts pops up in Quincy, Massachusetts in 1950. But that territoriality has really been part of the donut game. There are not Dunkin' Donuts usually where you can find Krispy Kremes and vice versa. But which of the 50 U.S. states has the largest number of independently owned donut shops? Actually, scratch that. Largest number of donut shops per person. California. Per capita.
Yeah.
There are more donut shops per person in California than any other part of the United States. And it was actually the first Dunkin' Donuts didn't open in California until like 2018. They haven't had Dunkin' Donuts and there's no Krispy Kreme there. California is a lawless land where there is no Dunkin', there's no Krispy Kreme. But CNN declared that Los Angeles is the donut capital of the United States. In most of America, Jason, there is an average of one donut shop for every 30,000 people. Okay?
Okay.
In Los Angeles, there is one donut shop for every 7,000 people.
Wow.
It's more than triple the volume of donut shops per capita. There's one very specific person, Jason. One man. Normally, I don't like great man history, but there is one man, the Donut King of California, who is clearly responsible for this. That is Ted Ngoy, the Donut King of California. He was born Bun Tek Ngoy in Cambodia, and he was among the sort of lower class rural communities of Cambodia who specifically have Chinese heritage. So like the sort of the social stratas of Cambodia, from around, sometime in the 19th century up until the 1970s was that, urban spaces tend to have your intelligentsia who would be quite more wealthy. And then rural spaces were really left to their own devices and didn't get a lot of centralized support. And if you had Chinese heritage or if you were Muslim, you were at the bottom rung of society. They just didn't like people who came from those backgrounds. So he grows up on a farm. His mother scrapes enough money together to send him to Phnom Penh, which is the capital of Cambodia, where he goes to school and starts to study business. And he falls in love, Jason. Falls in love
with donuts.
With a woman. Doesn't fall in love, doesn't even know what a donut is yet, Jason. Falls in love with a woman of
You want to know why donuts have that hole in it? This man loved him so much.
He's the king of donuts, Jason, not a lover of donuts.
Put a hole right through it with his...
No. He fell in love with his wife, eventually, who was a woman of a much higher ranking. And her family held like prominent government positions. Her uncle was like a colonel in the army and this sort of thing. We don't have time to go into this love story, but I do encourage everyone to go look up Ted Ngoy's story because it is full on Romeo and Juliet. They get married in secret.
Yeah.
He is forced by her family to tell her that he doesn't love her. After he says that, he pulls out a knife and stabs himself in the chest because he's so heartbroken that he told this woman he didn't love her. And then while he's recovering in the hospital, she ODs on sleeping pills. It is literally the plot of Romeo and Juliet, but you've gender swapped, I think. No, you haven't. No, Juliet stabbed herself in the chest. It's insane. he seduced her with flute music. It's crazy.
You were going to skip this and talk for like 40 minutes about where donuts come from in Amsterdam? We got to get your priorities straight.
I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to let your imagination run wild. He also hid in her bedroom with her consent for 45 days and had to like curl up into corners under the bed so the maids wouldn't find him. It's amazing. It's a crazy story.
That somehow ends with him becoming the donut king of California.
It ends with him becoming the donut. So eventually, after the whole stabbing and attempted sleep pill suicide thing, the family's like, all right, fine.
Why
do
they hate him so much? Just because
he's just poor. He's just poor and Chinese. He's, as far as they're concerned, he's trash. What's important, though, is that gets resolved. What he has to do in order to stay married without the family getting involved is he has to join the military and become a respectable citizen. And because
they're probably just hoping that he dies and therefore doesn't come back.
They're really hoping that he dies. They do not give a shit. But he eventually becomes a major in the Cambodian army, has a pretty decent rank, starting to make things work. And then things kind of shift, right? Now, Jason, how familiar are you with the Khmer Rouge?
I assume something's red.
Yeah, there is something red. The Khmer Rouge was the name for the totalitarian government of Cambodia between 1975 and 1979. They are unofficially the government according to the United Nations until 1991 for really weird reasons. Super radical group made up actually of both far left and far right organizations in Cambodia before 1975.
It turns out, I think, that politics, much like the world, is round. And if you go too far on either spectrum, you do kind of meet back around in the same place, which is fascism.
Yeah. So their leader, Pol Pot, was
I have heard of Pol Pot.
You heard of Pol Pot. So that's the Khmer Rouge. He blended a lot of Stalinist and Maoist ideas together, but was sort of tempered by the more radical, tempered meaning sent in a different kind of crazy by the really right-wing elements of what would make up the Khmer Rouge.
Oh, he was like fusion fascism.
Correct. That's a great way to think of it. Khmer Rouge is anti-urban. They hate the cities. They're very agrarian. They want to get everyone back into the land, working the land. Anti-intellectual.
Yeah, I bet they're anti-education. They want to keep people. They might be the kind of people that remove funding from universities and colleges to make sure that people don't grow up educated and therefore ever to see through their bullshit.
Yeah. Now, they were burning schools to the ground and arresting people for wearing glasses because people who wear glasses have to be
smart
intellectuals. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And of course, they believed in the supremacy of a singular and pure Southeast Asian empire because, of course, they did.
The thing I hate most about the nature of singular purity when it comes to the concept of race is that when you see in almost every other element of life, singular purity usually makes something weaker. When you think about creating metal and steel, you have to mix different metals in order to make them stronger.
I can't argue with you on any of that.
Other than whole ingredient foods. That's actually usually pretty good.
Usually. So, the actively racist, the actively anti-intellectual Khmer Rouge carried out a massive genocide against the Cambodian people, resulting in 3 million dead, including an estimated 75% of all Muslims in Cambodia, making it the most successful, I guess, attempt to eliminate a people from this planet.
Oh, wow.
In 1979, Jason, 4 years after Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. By the way, this all happened, 3 million dead in 4 years. This is rough. And you've probably even heard of the killing fields.
Yes.
Which is just these mass graves of all the dead, mostly of the Muslims, and again, the people of Chinese ethnicity. So from 1975 to 1979, this horrible civil war genocide is happening. And then Pol Pot invaded Vietnam, which was a mistake on his part, but good for everyone else.
An overreach, one might say.
Yeah, and so within the year, Vietnam occupied Cambodia. Like, it took them no time at all. This is the Vietnam that 4 years earlier successfully finished off its war with the United States, and then, like, 25 years before that had finished off its war against France. And for some reason, Pol Pot was like, yeah, we could take them. So Vietnam invades and then occupies Cambodia for like the better part of a decade. That's also not a great time in Cambodian history. There isn't a systematic genocide being carried out, but the Vietnamese aren't exactly like, it's an occupation.
Yeah.
There's constant struggles and conflict between them. But by 1989, the United Nations put a task force together that took over control of Cambodia, resulting in Cambodia's constitution, which passed in 1991, and subsequently they held their first free and fair elections. Cambodia is now a republic. Pol Pot, by the way, was arrested, and he died in prison, but then was tried in absentia in the 1990s. So, for Ted Ngoy, his status as a military officer and his ethnicity and the fact that his wife came from a wealthy urban family meant that he had to get the fuck out of Cambodia. The United States set up a refugee program for a lot of people, but specifically in response to this genocide. And so he comes to California and lives in Camp Pendleton for a while. And he and his wife are sponsored by a church. And he starts working a lot of odd jobs, including a night job at a gas station. So he starts working at a gas station at night, and sort of across the street from the gas station, he sees a donut shop. And man, there's always a line out the door, right? People just loving them donuts. And so one day he goes over to the donut shop and apparently on his knees, like, begs them to how do I make the donut money?
Teach me the ancient art of the donut.
And they're like, yo, dude, we just franchised this from a company and they have like a managerial training program. Here's the flyer. You can just go do that.
I know we keep saying this is the most American story, but this is maybe the most American story.
This is truly the donut. This is what I'm saying. The donut is the United States of America.
I would say the hamburger, but sure, I hear you.
I think the story we're telling here pips it for the donut for me. But he does the managerial training. He learns how to make the donuts. He gets assigned to a shop, just sort of in the Inland Empire. Does that mean anything to you, by the way?
I was just asking, is this where the phrase "make the donuts" comes from in terms of like getting the job done or bringing in the money?
That is a Dunkin' Donuts slogan.
No, okay.
Time to make the donuts was just that Dunkin' Donuts slogan. Sorry. The Inland Empire, which is the area east of downtown Los Angeles, which is technically not Los Angeles, but which is pretty much Los Angeles. And it's also where all the different peoples who are not white live in much of Los Angeles. So he starts working for these people, and he employs his family to save on labor costs, his wife and his two sons. They start working. They're pulling 17-hour shifts. Everybody's grinding to sell donuts so they can pool all the money together. And then at the end, so this is all happening within like a year. By the end of 1975-76, he buys his first donut shop off an old Jewish couple who were retiring. They had run Christie's Donuts for like 25 years. And they were like retiring.
See, I told you. The Jewish influence on donuts is prevalent.
The Jewish influence on donuts is prevalent. It's called Christie's Donuts. A fun note, when Ted and his wife became American citizens, she changed her name to Christie. Which is I love it. So he opens his first Christie's Donuts there. By 1980, actually by 1979, he will own 5 Christie's donuts. Every time he opens a new donut shop, he renames it Christie's.
It's so funny to me that the Jewish and Cambodian donut shop is Christ named. You know what I mean? Like that is
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Like 100%. Both people were like, well, we're not going to name it like Stein's, like Christie's.
Christie's.
Yeah. Christ's in the name. This is a good Christian donut shop.
Yeah. So he's really good at selling donuts. And he realizes when he gets to the 5th shop, this is unsustainable. He cannot keep running. He cannot produce children fast enough for them to take over these donut shops.
Oh boy.
So he makes very incredible decision. He says, I gotta approach this differently. What if I just repeat my story, but with other people?
Right, he franchises it.
He starts to franchise, but not only does he franchise it, he gets an RV, a beat up RV. He and his wife drive to refugee camps in the United States with Cambodians. And they go and say, hey, here's the deal. We will put the money up. We'll get you set up in the shop. We will supply you with all the ingredients. My wife will teach you English. We'll teach you how to run the books. And the deal is we just split the money. You pay me my franchise fee every month, and then we split the profits. You take the majority of the profits, but obviously he gets the franchise fee so that he has a steady income. And we're just going to do that. He completely...
That seems like a little more successful than the here's a coffee, here's a donut, your job interviews at 10 version of like actually helping people sustainably get a trade and get out of destitution.
Yeah. And understand, for these refugees, they don't know English. Most of them had usually an agricultural background. Like they don't know how to do business. And the US refugee program, while it has saved them from genocide, usually gives them a really small monthly stipend to live on.
Do you mean to tell me it's not setting them up for success?
It's not really setting them up for success. Yeah, there's no robust education programs to teach them English or job skill training or just how to live in the United States. So yeah, he drives around this camper van and just starts hiring, recruiting, creating business partnerships with Cambodian refugees.
This is the only time that anyone's ever told a story where some dude gets in a van and drives around to pick up refugees and it actually ends up good and not like a horror story.
Yeah. All of it, by the way, done on a handshake agreement. Never signs any paperwork. Ted Ngoy never signs paperwork for this handshake agreement. He actually doesn't remember how many shops he opened. But he reckons it was about 50 across California. Every one of them called Christie's. And then each shop was a success. There were no failed Christie's donuts. They're fucking donuts. Everybody wants a donut. And they're so cheap that even in 2019, you can sell them for $2. And it's still, you're making money off of that. The crazy thing is that once each Christie's got established, everyone was like, well, why don't we just do the same thing Ted did? And then they get in camper vans and go find more Cambodian refugees, and they franchise more donut shops.
And now for something completely unrelated.
Unintentionally, I know this is a story about donuts and refugees, but it also is a story about the success of camper vans.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, if you got a good sturdy RV, you can change
on the world.
So what you're telling me is if someone drives up to me with a camper van, offers me a shop business, say yes.
Take it immediately.
History tells me this will be successful.
Naomi, I think no. I think that's how people abduct you.
Oh, damn. I always get those things confused.
Yeah.
$1 Million Business or Abducted, our new game show from the Life's Little Murder Boys production.
Unfortunately, the
You
problem...
mean to tell me they've not got cute dogs that I need to go look at? Ugh.
No, Naomi, I think if two guys show up in a camper van and say, get in, you should not.
You should run away.
I learn things all the time from this podcast.
That's what we're here for. By 1991, Jason, the same year that Cambodia's constitution goes through, there were 2,400 Cambodian-owned donut shops in the state of California. And even more up the West Coast, into Oregon and into Washington. They don't do as much business there as they do in California. But 2,400 shops, raking in well over $1 billion a year, just on the backs of refugees trying to escape genocide. There is no hard numbers on how many people were actually able to afford to escape the Khmer Rouge thanks to the money made in these shops. Because all the money that gets made in these shops, if it's not expanding into new shops, is spending money to bring people from Cambodia over to California through this refugee plan to then open more donut shops.
It's almost like a nonprofit sort of business refugee.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not nonprofit. It's very much for profit.
Right. But basically, this is a donut front for a consistent refugee relocation and a refugee relocation program and training program and
So no one knows how many people. The best estimates, it may have been as many as like 30,000 people who are basically saved from genocide as a result of Ted and his subsequent partners. And the Cambodian Business Owners Association is the heart and organizing body of the Cambodian American population across the United States. These guys they form they buy, it was what was it called? The JCC, right? They set up schools and they set up theaters and they set up community centers and they set up retirement homes and all the things that we associate with
and is that all funded by donuts?
Focus. It's all, my God, it's all funded by donuts. It is all funded by donuts. It's so incredible. My $2 for a donut, I don't know, put on a really mediocre production of Our Town somewhere in in Sacramento. It's a fascinating story. Now, as for Ted, things don't go super well for Ted. Turns out he's a gambling addict, and by the 1990s, he does go bankrupt. It's really sad. It's really sad. Hold on. What
was his gambling of choice?
Everything, cards mostly, but he didn't matter. He starts the crazy thing is he'll buy a Cadillac and then drive it to Las Vegas and then come home on the bus. He will end up selling the car in Vegas for cash so he can keep gambling. By 1990, there are stories where everyone's pissed at him because, of course, he starts coming in and being like, hey, I need next month's franchise fee.
Right.
And then it's, no, I need 3 months now. I'm dude, we've already paid 6 months in advance. Things that happen. This is a common story with addicts and their relationships that they fall apart in this way. But there is a story where he knew he needed to leave when he went to knock on someone's door to ask for money, and they sort of opened the door, but no one was there, and all the inside doors were locked, but there was a stack of towels and the door to the shower was open. So they were like, you can shower, but get the fuck out when you're done. That's how far he fell. He goes back to Cambodia now that there's an actual democracy in place.
Does his wife go with him, or does his family fall apart?
He gets divorced in 1987. He does not live with his family as of 3 or 4 years ago. But when he goes to Cambodia, a friend of his wants to do a land deal, and he brings Ted in and is like, you know business, help me negotiate this. And he gets such a good price over asking that guy starts working with him again. And by 2003 or 4, he is a millionaire again. And he's been in Gambling Addicts Anonymous. Ted is fine today, everyone. He lives in Cambodia. He has a nice apartment. His gambling addiction is under control. He's been sober for like 15 or 20 years or something like that.
And he'll be on the podcast next week. No.
He has reconciled with his wife. His children are in his life. He just doesn't live with them in the United States or anything like that.
And how do you know all this?
Because there are 1,000 interviews. The Los Angeles Times has interviewed this guy every other year since 1983.
Okay.
There are so many interviews. The San Francisco Chronicle interviews him. Don't worry. The primary source data on this is deep. So this takes us back to our Spelling Bee episode. We mentioned in the Spelling Bee episode about how immigration is good. And I mentioned that since the year 2000, the majority of people in the United States today who are from South Asia and Southeast Asia came to the United States. That for those two ethnic groups, the vast majority of the population came to the United States in the last 25 years. That was the only point I needed to make, but we didn't explain how.
And what I'm hearing today is that beyond the idea that diversity is a strength, not a weakness, that purity ends up being a weakness, not a strength, it's that this is a story of how a refugee maintained not only like the American dream, and as you said, at this point became the donut king of California, but then was able to create a business that was able to successfully employ and save so many other refugees. And this is a foundational part of the best parts of our country. This is actually what makes America great.
Yes. And it goes a little bit further than that, Jason. So I wanted to find out why. Why were so many South Asian and Southeast Asian immigrants coming to the United States since the year 2000?
Donuts.
Well, I'm sure it's not part of it. So I looked up the Office of Government and Accountability Statistics and a Pew poll of immigrants from South and Southeast Asia. And it turns out that 1 in 3 of them listed as their primary motivation for emigrating to the United States, reuniting with family. So many people came to the United States in the 1970s and in the 1980s as a result of these really horrific civil wars and conflicts, which are directly a response to decades or centuries of colonialism and the subsequent fallouts that created power vacuums, but that many families were separated from each other. Currently, only 7% of South and Southeast Asian immigrants list escaping from violence or persecution as their reason. So that has taken the largest decline since the 1970s.
That's good.
Yes, and the largest increase is, and again, this is 1 in 3 people, they come to the United States because they want to reunite with their families. And that's radically changing the voting population of the United States. The fastest growing ethnic group in the United States, set to potentially become like the 3rd largest voting bloc by 2030, are these immigrants. And 82% of those people who were polled said that making it easier for families to sponsor visas should be a priority for the United States government.
No wonder.
And that quote, new immigrants from Asia should be allowed, new immigrants from Asia say that new immigrants should be allowed to obtain legal permanent residency if they have immediate relatives of U.S. citizens. So if you've got a brother or a father or a spouse, you should be able to become a citizen of the United States.
Unfortunately, there is a real tide in the opposite direction right now.
Well, you've got to hold on. Like the donut itself.
Or Wilson Phillips.
It is about being shelf stable, everyone. Holding steady for the next 5 years to the best of your ability. Because this is the story we were promised. When I was a kid, when you were a kid, we were told that the United States is built by immigrants.
Yes.
Right? It is a country of immigrants. And that story usually comes out in the form of Ellis Island, bring us you're tired, you're poor, you're hungry, you're huddled masses yearning to be free. That's the story we're told. That story has never gone away. From 1975 until yesterday, a man escaping from genocide built a donut empire that has successfully built, honestly, a thing most Americans want more of, and has brought an entire community together under this American superstructure that isn't exclusive. They're in your backyard. These are your neighbors. The donut shop you probably go to if you live on the West Coast is run by Cambodians. And if you don't live in the West Coast, it's probably also run by immigrants.
Well, it's also that it's not only has it saved the lives and created an infrastructure to add to communities, it's also providing a very cheap and important service, because as we are facing the possibility of a recession, as you mentioned in the Great Depression, what is cheap and affordable food that you might want to have access to in great numbers at a reasonable price? It would be donuts. And now there is an infrastructure for you to be able to have that. And because this isn't necessarily a corporate owned chain like a Dunkin' Donuts or a Krispy Kreme, you may see that they are more resistant to raising prices and therefore keeping it affordable in your time of need. And I also think one of the things that's so important about this story is that when it comes to true success, it is not a zero-sum game. It is an additive situation. It is collaboration. There is such fear of immigration that people are going to take away something that is yours. But actually, that only happens when you limit the amount of success that people are able to have. When you put a cap on success, then suddenly you have to fight for spots. But when success is open, when you are able to collaborate, when we actually achieve strength through the diversification of our country's portfolio, when we invite lots of people with lots of different experiences and needs to fill all the different spots all over, you create growth and allow new opportunities to exist, which only helps support pre-existing people who are here and allow them new means of prosperity as well. And so that is why immigration isn't a problem. It's fundamentally essential and particularly egregious when we try and stop or send back refugees.
Madness. Let them open donut shops. Or if not donut shops, something else. Build a structure in place where you don't need a Ted Noy to like get in his camper van and do it.
Or imagine,
you do it, government.
I was about to say, imagine if that was a government program, right?
Imagine if that was a government program. And like, we could get into like a long history of that and the Freedmen's Bureau and how that's actually been a problem in the United States for a long time. But I just thought this is the donut. To me, this story
is the metaphor.
The Donut King is the story of the United States. And to Tom Holland, I say, sir, there is an American food, and it is American because it comes from someone else.
A few things that I learned today. I didn't know that New Amsterdam was New York. I've heard of New Amsterdam. Never occurred to me that that's New York. Similarly to like having learned recently that Edo became Tokyo.
Yeah, fair enough.
The donut dollies. Incredible. I now want a spy comic about the I don't know, like secret agents going undercover in a foreign country as the donut dollies, but they're actually like cool Charlie's Angel-esque secret agents. I think that is.
Are they doing a heist or are they doing some spy stuff?
In my head, it's spy stuff, but could also be a heist. There's donut dollies costumes. I just feel like the donut dollies is it's a useful IP to exploit for a very specific kind of sort of fun spy sexploitation comedy film.
Excellent.
And I didn't know that Krispy Kreme was the first official mass-produced donut franchise in the United States. I was ignorant to the power of the cream, and now I understand that it was crisp first, dunk second. Andrew, anything about the research that went into this episode that you want to share behind the scenes?
Yes, so I will put it in the show notes, but this is now, I want to say, our 5th or 7th episode where we've talked about genocide. And when you do historical research, now I happen to have a background in specifically studying genocide. That's probably why it comes up quite often, because it's a thing I know a lot about. So I'm going to put some resources on what is called, on a phenomenon called vicarious trauma. So there is a risk when you are doing research into these kinds of topics, into traumatic topics, that you as the researcher can start to experience symptoms of traumatic stress. This is a thing that happened to me during my master's degree. There was something about, I just going through 100 different testimonies of women who survived violence during the Yugoslav civil wars takes a toll on your mental health. And it is important, in order to be a good researcher, in order to be just a learner, you must protect yourself. You have to be safe. I also think vicarious trauma is, and the skills necessary to protect yourself from vicarious trauma, really important right now, because it feels like we're experiencing, if not direct trauma, we're experiencing vicarious trauma constantly, which is why I'm also going to link you to a group that I am a part of, which is the Protecting the Investigator in Traumatic Research Areas group. It is a research group that is specifically trying to expand the availability of resources to deal with vicarious trauma in humanities research. There's a lot in the medical sciences and in sociology and other social studies, but in the humanities, there's not very much in terms of resources, so we're gonna make them. That's what we've decided to do, us little group. So I'll put links to that in the show notes because it's very important that everyone be safe out there when you're enjoying your donuts.
And on that note, that is how we make the donuts here at Seemingly Unrelated. But actually, the best way to help us make the donuts is by subscribing to our Patreon. For only $2 a month, you get a special bonus episode. This month is Food Month. We're excited to share even more hot takes on culinary delights on our Patreon, but every month there's going to be something different for only $2. That is the best way for you to help support the show. The easiest way to help support and very meaningfully support this podcast is by, if you are listening on Spotify, please go ahead and rate the show. If you're listening on Apple, please leave a review. Go ahead and share, tell a friend, anything that helps get the word out. But in particular on those two platforms, those are the best ways of enhancing the algorithm, helping us get in front of more people, which allows us to combat misinformation at a greater scale, but also allows us to get closer to be able to bring on sponsors and then make this show a little bit more self-sustaining. For everybody here at Seemingly Unrelated, we deeply appreciate you. Enjoy the appropriate carb snack of your taste today, and remember to stay curious.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Time to make the donuts. Seemingly Unrelated is a Life's Little Murder Boards production. Created and hosted by Andrew Johnstone and Jason Howard. Audio production and editing services provided by Naomi Cohn. Our artwork is by Megan Zemet. The theme song is Irizumi by Pistol Jazz. To find out more about everyone involved and access the show notes for this episode, visit us at seeminglyunrelatedpod.com.